This episode was made possible by ExpressVPN. Start browsing the web securely with 3 months free by going to expressvpn.com/MMI. On this episode of Meet My Inspiration, I speak with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil is an astrophysicist, author, TV presenter, and the director of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. Neil is known to millions around the world as an expert on all matters related to space, and he makes complicated subjects both appealing to learn about and accessible. But beyond his impressive accomplishments, of which there are many, he is also a really funny, sweet, and insightful person. And now, please welcome Neil deGrasse Tyson. Hi everyone, I'm Chris Minion and this is Meet My Inspiration. My guest today is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil, thank you for joining me on Meet My Inspiration.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm honored.
My great pleasure.
That implies that I have the capacity to inspire. So
Definitely
now I have to live up to that. See, I'd rather have you have low expectations.
Impossible. You've done too much. Well, let's go back to your childhood, Neil. You first became interested in astronomy and all things space during a trip to the Hayden Planetarium in New York at the age of 9. I want to know, do you remember the first time you actually looked through a telescope?
Oh yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
It was a sort of star party. This was in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I was in 7th grade. And this now would have been, I would have been 11, maybe. Yeah, 11. And is that 11? I was 11. And the star party, they had telescopes set up. You know, the star party, they're amateur astronomers typically who bring out their wares and show them off, really. I mean, if you want to learn how to buy a telescope, don't read books. Just go to a star party and ask an amateur astronomer who brought the telescope, tell me about your scope. Then you'll get a half hour. Well, we did this and I bought these lenses and I cleaned these and I redesigned that. And so you get quite a schooling when you have that kind of exposure. But in any event, on that evening, I saw the craters on the moon. You see Saturn's rings are quite spectacular, particularly if you've never seen them before. And I'd seen the moon through binoculars before, and that was quite striking because the moon wasn't just bigger as you'd expect binoculars to be, to provide for you. It was better. So you could almost reach out and touch the craters and the mountains and the valleys. And my first time looking through binoculars preceded my first time looking through a telescope. That's common, of course. Binoculars are much more available. But that might have been around 1969. I mean, when we were first going to the moon. So to know we're headed to the moon and then pull out binoculars and see the moon in a way where it does not translate in a photo or in a, and you're not just enlarging what you're seeing. There's much more resolution available to you when you use binoculars. And so I could see texture and the mountains and valleys and craters and hills. And so I just viewed the universe as this limitless place of inquiry. And
it really changes your perspective, I think.
Yeah. For me, I wouldn't say that it changed my perspective because I don't think I went in with one. It definitely added to my to my perspectives.
Good point.
And it set me on a journey of cosmic inquiry. And it was not until I was 11 where I realized that you could make a career of this. And I met professional astrophysicists. So from age 9 to 11, it's more just a cool thing to do. Kids just, you do it because it's fun. You're not thinking, one day I will make money doing this. You know, that's not the thought when you first do something as a kid, typically. So by age 11, I realized that there were professionals doing what I was doing. And
well, let's talk about one of those professionals, Neil. I want to know, who is Dr. Mark Chartrand? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, and you are actually.
What impact did he have on your life?
So there I am. I attended, you know, you go to the public show of the Hayden Planetarium. Back then there was 4 per year, 1 per season. And once you've done that, you can ask, is there anything more? Well, there are the exhibits that surround the planetarium at the American Museum of Natural History. But there's even more, all right? Any good institution, as is the American Museum of Natural History, has programs that go beyond just the static exhibits. So in fact, there were evening classes in modern astrophysics. The Amateur Astronomy Club, which I joined, also had evening, no, there weren't classes, but there was a lecture series. So I attended the classes and the lecture series while in middle school. And this further stoked my interest. And in doing so, I got to see science educators, scientists, as well as scientists for the first time, sort of in action. And Mark Chartrand was the director, back then we called it the chairman of the Hayden Planetarium at the time. So that's title, okay, fine. But he also taught classes. And I took a class on modern astrophysics from him. And I was just so impressed by how much he knew about the universe. And I could not imagine knowing that much about, I mean, it was like, is this even possible? How does one even attain this? And I thought to myself, it would take a lifetime studying this, because everything that people asked him, he knew about black holes and the Big Bang and you know, the planets and the sun and galaxies, and I was starstruck by it, and not knowing that, of course, to obtain that to acquire that much information, you go to college and you major in a subject, and then you go to graduate school. He has a PhD. So you add all that up, that's at least 8 years, 9 years, sometimes 10 years of devotion to that subject. But I'm only 13 at the time. So 10 years when you're 13 feels like an eternity. But I knew I was in love with the subject. And so whatever it would take, it would not stand in my way. And I would just pursue this goal. Because I said to myself, if I'm ever an astrophysicist, I want to know as much about the universe as he does. So for me, it was a mentor by example, not because we had daily exchanges of mentor-mentee relationship. It was just, I'm in the class and he's there, and I see he has this expertise. And add to that was probably on your list you were going to get to, someone else named, it was a guy who was one of the major lecturers at the planetarium, and he did a lot of the live sky shows, and his name was Fred Hess. And he was quite the storyteller, an educator. So he wasn't a professional astrophysicist, but he was a professional educator, and he taught science. And just to hear him speak, he had such a facility with words. You know, sometimes when people say you have a facility with words, it means you use big words, and then no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about his capacity to communicate an idea in a way that you cared about, and in a way where you just wanted to learn more, no matter what it was. And he traveled the world chasing eclipses, by the way, because eclipses don't come to you. You have to go to them. I'm talking about solar eclipses. So he's a big eclipse chaser. Every place he went, he had stories from those times and the people that he met and the science that unfolded. So I said to myself, if I'm ever an educator, I want to be able to have the capacity to instill in who's listening the level of interest and enthusiasm that he was instilling in me. And both of those were happening at around the same time in middle school. So my middle school years were quite transformative for me.
Yeah, of course. Well, speaking of Dr. Mark Chartrand, you said he was the chairman of
the Hayden Planetarium. Yes.
The title now is director of the Hayden Planetarium, and that is in fact you.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a weird twist of fate to have a
It's a little weird. By the way, that story, I think it plays better like in suburbs and in smaller communities. You know, in New York City, I say, you know, I came here as a kid, and now I'm the director. It's okay. So it doesn't play as well in the city.
Well, I think it's a crazy twist of fate that actually happened. It's a great accomplishment for
Maybe
you.
There's nothing twisted about it. I mean, twist of fate implies that there's a new road that showed up or some other thing. This was, by the way, I didn't live my life with this goal.
Yeah.
I just knew but what I do have now as director, I have a sense of duty, a combination of obligation and duty to make sure that a next generation has has a similarly impactful encounter with the subjects that we bring to them as I did with the educators and scientists who came before me.
Well, in
So
that role,
that's a lot of pressure too.
oh,
It's good pressure, but it's a duty that I
well, if
carry
I
with
may
me
say
every
so
day.
myself, you're knocking it out of the park with that role. So don't worry
Oh well,
about it.
thank
You're doing more than
you,
enough.
thank you, thank
Um,
you. But just so you know, I was, there's a guiding star there, right? Otherwise, you are just what you are. But I say to myself, no, I can do better than this because they did better. No, I I don't think I'm reaching my audience the way they reached me. So that I think that was an important force operating on my methods, tools, and tactics to communicate.
well, let's talk about another person that you definitely looked up to early on in your life, and that would be Carl Sagan.
Hmm.
Obviously, Carl Sagan is a world-renowned astronomer, I guess you could say. He also had a huge impact on your life. Um, you guys professionally are have a lot of similarities, but what I want to know is, you said that he showed you what kind of person that you wanted to be. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I was already embedded in the universe before I knew his name. And so I don't credit him for opening up my eyes to science or the universe.
Mhm.
Um, he- when I was in high school, so now middle school days are over. High school, all this is continuing. I'm, head of the astronomy club, and I'm in the physics club, and I'm totally geeked out as a student. In New York City, by the way, this is an era before being sort of nerd geek got anybody's respect. In fact, it was active disrespect.
Mm.
It was the nerds that got the wedgies, in the locker room from the football players and there. But I've thought a lot about what accounted for this transition, because there's now a geek culture that is highly respected, and the word is no longer used pejoratively,
Mhm.
only perhaps in fun.
Mhm.
It's actually used with some pride. And is it the Best Buy who has the Geek Squad, right? Where and it's there it is on the side of their van as they go to repair your electronic equipment at home. So the fact that the word has been elevated, I use geek synonymously with nerd here. That I think that started with the movie Revenge of the Nerds. It showed that the nerds actually had power of mind, power of solutions.
Mhm.
And you don't want to piss off a nerd because they could they could do things back to you. And in the era of computing and information technology and the
Yeah.
like, so my point is, when computers became common, then you needed to know a nerd to help you fix your computer challenges. And so that elevated the stock value of all nerds in the world. And I think that happened early 1980s into the 90s and even to this day.
Mhm.
Then the patron saint of nerds, one of the richest people in the world, is Bill Gates. So that helps, right? By the way, you can become really rich being a nerd, and then
Mhm.
you work for them. So uh,
Well, it's
anyhow, so I was already sort of on this track, and my application to Cornell University was spotted by their the interests in the universe laced into the application was noticed by the admissions committee, and they sent the application to Carl Sagan's attention. He's a professor of astronomy at Cornell, and I, I, what happens next? He writes me a letter. And there it is, signed by him, saying, "Oh, I noticed from your application you're like the universe." Well, so do I. If you want to decide whether Cornell should be your choice, I invite you to come by and check out the campus, and I'll show you the offices. And it was like, whoa, whoa. I went, is this legit? Is this authentic? Is this because he already written some books, hadn't done Cosmos yet, but he was already famous.
Mhm.
Okay, it was on all the talk shows, on Johnny Carson, The Tonight Show.
Right.
So he was. I don't know if he was a household name, but anyone who knew anything and cared about science knew his name. So I was delighted by this. I took a bus up to Ithaca, and it was in the winter. And he met me outside the building. It was on a Saturday. So he came in on a Saturday and met me outside the building, took me up to the offices. And I remember this distinctly. This was just so badass. I'm there across the desk from him, and he just reaches back, didn't even look. It was like a no-look reach, right? And pulled a book, and it was one of the books he had written, and then he signed it to me, and I still have that book.
Wow.
And so when we're done, we're headed back. I'm going back to the bus station, and it begins to snow, as it so often does in Ithaca, New York. And he said, "Oh, I don't know if the bus might not come through. Here's my home number. If the bus doesn't come through, call, spend the night with my family, and leave tomorrow." And I once I got home, I just added all this up, and I said, "I'm just a nobody. Who am I?" Yet this famous person, is devoting even this level of attention in my way, in my direction. And I said to myself, if I am ever as famous as he is, it's one of these, if I am ever, right? I've already been through two of these. If I'm ever as famous as he is, I will treat students the way he has treated me. And so help to shape, no, not my interest in the universe. That was already established. That's why he invited me.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the humanity and the humility of it. I so greatly valued, and I've never not thought of that. I mean, to this day, if there's a student at the door waiting to come into my office, and I'm on the phone, I say, "Barack, I can't. I got somebody. I have a student at the door. I'll call you back."
You got to have
I'm
your
exaggerating
priorities
a little there, but in the sense of priorities that I have retained since then. By the way, our names are associated together because I ascended to his mantle as host of Cosmos.
Yeah.
But I only met him maybe 4 or 5 times.
Oh, really?
We never had a beer together or anything. It was not a mentor-mentee. A lot of what I do that I gather from a lot of what I do that where I was inspired by him, it's because of the example that he set. Not because he and I sat down and said, "Neil, here's what you do, and here's what you do next."
Sure.
There was none of that. That wasn't the nature of my relationship with him.
I would have guessed that you guys had gotten to know each other a bit better over the years, but no.
No. It was we were in each other's company maybe a total of 6 times.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're lucky to have had that, I guess, right? He was a fascinating
guy.
guy.
But I think if I can say something unorthodox and possibly heretical, I think the concept of a role model is overrated, in the sense that if you require or a role model or even a mentor, can be overrated in the sense that you can influence people just by what you say and your actions if they're visible enough to others. It doesn't have to be one-on-one. And if you're open enough to draw examples of how to live, how to think, how to behave from others. And nowadays, people's speeches are available online, people's conduct. You get to see this, and if you're open to it, you can absorb it and have it influence who and what you become in life, particularly in the formative years when you're in school. So that's why I have very few examples of just the people who sat down with me. Plus, by the way, my grades were just kind of average. So very few people said, "Hey, he'll go far," even though I knew I had ambitions from very early. But the system is so configured to equate success in life with getting high grades in school, that the rest of everyone else in school doesn't get the same attention or accolades. And so I had to, for a lot of my confidence in my own abilities was self-constructed. It didn't come from external praise by any teacher at any time in my history of schooling.
Okay, well, I'm curious. Let's dig into another aspect of your time at school, both high school and at Harvard. We were talking about you being a nerd or a geek throughout those years, But there was another side to you that most nerds or geeks don't really have to them usually. You were also an athlete. You
Yeah.
were the captain of your high school wrestling team. Oh, nothing. That's kind of a big accomplishment.
Okay.
And
Although it's New York City wrestling, it's not Iowa wrestling.
well,
In Iowa and Oklahoma,
well,
they're
while you were at
corn-fed.
Harvard,
They're corn-fed athletes, just to be clear. And they come in. That's a whole other just universe. But go on.
while you were at Harvard, I think in your senior year, you even lettered as a wrestler. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I had a losing record. I mean, I enjoyed wrestling, so I didn't do it because I was great at it.
Mhm.
Although I was good, but I wasn't like, they didn't write
If I could
articles of me.
interrupt, Neil, I'm sorry. What I want to focus on with wrestling is not your necessarily your success as an athlete, but the discipline that it requires just to participate at a collegiate level in that challenging sport. So, how do you think that your experience as a wrestler, and like I said, the discipline that it takes, how do you think that sort of helps shape who you are today?
So um, it shapes in ways that, there's the now cliched, well, the sports, and I learned teamwork and leadership and this. Sure, okay, but for me it served two roles. It was an escape from whatever else I was doing in the day.
Yeah.
An escape. And second, in wrestling, if you lose, you lost. There are other sports where if you lose, well, because someone dropped the pass or someone didn't make the final goal or somebody, and there's a whole sort of participation of whether what you're doing is good or not. The one-on-one construct of wrestling is for me, it's the purest of sports in that sense. And it's speed, agility, strength, and the person you're up against is exactly your weight. So you couldn't be better matched in a contest than in a one-on-one wrestling match. And so yes, it's discipline. It's discipline of it puts structure on your day. It disciplines what you eat, how often you eat. Um, it and also I'm going to make this statement, which can only be appreciated if you've ever wrestled. Okay. So it's a little awkward to just deliver this because as an educator, I like my sentences to be receivable by anybody, but I will just make this statement. Okay. I don't care what sport you have ever engaged in, the triathlon, the marathon, cross country skiing, distance swimming. I don't care. If you have ever wrestled and someone asks you, what's the hardest sport you've ever done? Your answer will be wrestling. So in other words, if you haven't wrestled, you'll get 20 different answers from all manner of people, depending on what their sports commitments are. If they have ever wrestled, they'll say wrestling. And I've tested this with no end. So my point is, remains to this day the greatest physical challenge I have ever faced. And so what that does is benchmark any other physical challenge you might have. All right. So you can say, no, this is not as hard as when I was wrestling. You need benchmarks in life. Otherwise you lose calibration
Yeah.
for how to react to forces that operate on you,
Sure.
either with you or against you. So for me, that's the role wrestling played. Plus I just enjoyed the strength, agility combination of that.
I saw a photo. I don't know if you tweeted it or something. I can't remember where I came across it. A photo of when you were a wrestler, and you were indeed strong. You were incredibly.
That photo got out from somebody at some point, so now it's just out there. No, I did not tweet that photo. My tweets are not nowhere near that self-serving. But yeah, in fact, I had just in that photo, I just come off the mat and I had just lost, and I was
Oh.
removing my headgear. That's what it is. And I was just coming, and the photo was taken at a low angle,
Uh-huh.
so it looks kind of. It's the one I think you're referring to.
Yeah.
And I look kind of hulking as I come off. But yeah, I was to be in shape. that's being in shape.
Definitely, definitely.
It benchmarks future attempts to be in shape. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's so for me, it benchmarked um, my physical existence for the rest of my life, even to this day.
Sure.
By the way, I will not say that it helped me do astrophysics. It didn't, but it did serve as a diversion when I just needed to just clear my head. And wrestling will clear your head,
Yeah.
clear my head, and then come back and approach the problems fresh.
Excellent. Well, Neil, you are an astrophysicist, as you just said, a cosmologist, a
Well,
planetary
that I
scientist.
was never wrote cosmologist. That's a
Oh,
subfield of astrophysics, and somebody put it in my wiki page,
uh-huh.
and everyone believes that wiki pages are all true. But if you look at my actual own homepage, the
Uh-huh.
word cosmology is not there.
All right.
So
Stricken from the record.
you're doing your homework on the internet, and I get that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's basically say you're a guy who's really into space. Uh,
Yes. Okay.
did you ever have any ambitions towards becoming an astronaut?
Um, so I have two replies to that. One is no, because I was interested in the universe. And I don't know if you know this, but you can calculate, you can ask when astronauts orbit the Earth, they're in space, how far away from Earth are they? Well, we can recite that distance. The space station is orbiting about 250 miles above the Earth,
Mm.
okay, 450 kilometers, something like that. And all right, well, how far is that? Well, if you take a schoolroom globe and say, all right, tell someone to you got one behind you. It's about a foot across, right? And ask yourself, how high above that globe would you find the space station? And forgive the English units, but it would be 3/8 of an inch above
Well, I have a
the
globe right
globe.
here.
Let's bring it here
All right.
and let's see. There you go. And now you go 3/8 of an inch above. No,
Right,
that's too high.
is it
No,
too
that's not three. Lower. That looks about right. That's right.
high?
So that's how high above the world they are. And I am studying galaxies, large scale structure of the universe, the Big Bang. That's not space. So period. So the fact that we were going to the moon, that was a little better.
Uh-huh.
I get that. But then you look at who's going. Well, okay. Um, None of them looked like me, but that alone was not a heavy force operating. Like I said, I I'm not into role models. I'm not saying, well, I need a black person to go to the moon so that I can think that I can go to the moon. That's not, no. I, I had more power over my own ambitions than that. But what I did notice was that every single astronaut was all but two, it turns out. I would later do, create the tables for them. All but two, uh, every single astronaut um, was in the military.
Hmm.
They went to military academies. And even though NASA is a civilian agency, everyone they were sending up were military test pilots. This is in the 1960s at a time when the Vietnam War was rapidly becoming unpopular. So I'm thinking to myself, I know I will never go to a military college to become an officer. If that's what you need to go into space, I'm never going into space. So combine these two forces, and no, I had no interest in going into space. By the way,
Well,
that's different from, let me add a third, you didn't ask this, but it's related.
okay.
Um, Most of my colleagues of my generation got interested in the universe because we were going to the moon. My interest was independent of that. I was interested in the universe with or without NASA.
Mm.
So I'm one of the rare ones in my generation that said that my interest in the universe was in spite of NASA, not because of it.
Well, it seems that the space tourist industry is kind of inevitable at this point. Would you have any interest in, going up to space, even just a little bit, as you kind of put it?
I would delight in experiencing weightlessness,
Yeah.
but you don't need to go into space to
Yeah, they
do
have
that.
the
You can go
what
into
is it, the vomit comet they call it?
the vomit comet. Apparently, they're trying to, improve the image. So they don't call it the vomit comet anymore, but the rest of us do, but they don't. I think there's some critical dose of Dramamine that precludes the. Plus, if they tell you what to eat and not to eat in the 24 hours beforehand, but I would delight in experiencing that zero G, as well as they can have certain trajectories of their arc where they can simulate moon gravity, 1/6 G, and Mars gravity, which is 40% of Earth gravity. So I would delight in that, but that doesn't require going into space. And by the way, if you're going to send a ship to the moon or to Mars, I'd sign up for that, but not just driving around Earth boldly going where hundreds have gone before. That's not, for me, that's not space. And by the way, the definition of space is actually, and I don't want to take you down that road, but
go ahead.
It's defined, it's 100 kilometers up. I say that's awfully round number. Where does that come from? Well, right now in the daytime, when you look up, if it's a clear day, the sky is blue. Okay. Well, it's blue because that is blue light scattered out of the sunlight that otherwise reached Earth's surface. And that happens particularly intensely at sunset. So much blue is taken out of the sun that the sun is amber. It's like even reddish under some conditions, especially when you have soot from forest fires. And the rest of the sky is a deep, deep, deep blue. Okay, so you start taking blue out of the sunlight, the sun becomes red, the sky becomes blue. That's the atmosphere doing this. As you ascend, the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner and thinner. There's a point where there's not enough atmosphere above your head for scattered light to turn it blue. In fact, it doesn't turn it any color. In fact, there's hardly any atmosphere at that point. So when you look up in daylight, you see the night sky. You see, that's what's above you right now. The darkened sky is above you. You just can't see it because of the scattered blue light. So you find the place in the atmosphere where the sky is no longer blue. And we call that space, and that's 100 kilometers. So these up and down trips, there's suborbital flights that are being considered by Blue Origin. So some of them are not quite full orbit. You just go up and then you're weightless the whole time you're coming back. That's a suborbital flight. As Scott Carpenter had done, one of the earliest astronauts who was launched. Point is, that's our definition of space. And so our definition of space is atmospherically defined. And that's, for me, that's just a little odd. So for the limits of the atmosphere to define when you're in space, that says, suppose we had half the atmosphere we do. It was half the thickness. That means space would be at 50 kilometers, not 100. Suppose we had a fourth the thickness, then it would be 25 kilometers. Suppose we had no atmosphere at all. By that definition, just standing on Earth, you're in space. And so, again, I'm an astrophysicist. I think about space differently from a space agency does. And so for me, if you want to go into space, send me somewhere. So yeah, if you're going to send a ship to the moon, I'll sign up. Mars, you give me a good movie account. Give me a few good books to read, some good music. I'm there.
You're up for it. Cool. Neil, the recent Black Lives Matter protests sparked by the murder of George Floyd, and now with the verdict in the Breonna Taylor case and many other related events too, have obviously brought so much attention towards police brutality, especially as it pertains to minority communities. I would like to know, what have your personal experiences been like with the police over the years? Have you had any negative encounters, or what's your experience been?
So I've written about this, and it's online if anyone wants to see it. It's called Reflections on the Color of My Skin. And I wrote that while I live in New York City. And I wrote that while there were protesters passing by my window, outside my window. It was a mass of protesters en route from one place to another. But that just made it so much more real. They're not just images on CNN or anywhere else. There's protesting there. And so yeah, it's complicated because I've been stopped many times by the police, many times. A few times there's speeding tickets. Okay, you get those, all right? All the other times I'm stopped by the police, there are no charges pressed. There are no, and nothing happens. So I would say over my entire life, I've probably been stopped by the police somewhere between 15 and 20 times. And I don't know how that compares with others. You know, I'm a law abiding citizen. And so, um, but I can say that other than the several times where you get a speeding ticket, okay, a deserved speeding ticket, other times I was stopped and no ticket was given. I was just stopped. I think it amounted to a form of automotive stop and frisk, right?
I was going to
There's
ask
one
about
time I
that.
was coming. There's one time I was coming over a bridge, and I think the speed limit was 45, and I might have been doing 50, and they pulled me over. And then they made me do a sobriety test. Okay. And then they said, we stopped because you were going a little fast on the other side. I said, okay, I didn't look. Thanks for telling me. I said, okay, you can go. Okay. So here's my point. Um, Other than one case I can share with you, um, they were all polite in each case. They're not disrespectful. Um, and no, I wasn't physically harmed.
Mm.
Um, but what you learn is that the more encounters you have with the police, the higher is the chance that one of them can go bad.
Mm.
And that's what this is all about. All right. If there's a 5% chance that an encounter with a police officer can go bad, and I've stopped 20 times, then I have one of those, then my statistics are not in my favor. Okay. If you're stopped 5 times in your life or 10 times, you're well below that threshold. So, so, um, so it was just odd. And another time they stopped, I was stopped, and this is at night, and they said, and they didn't tell you why they stopped you until they start asking all these other questions. So they say, your license, fine, get out of the car. Please get out of the car, right? So I get out of the car. And then there's a question, who's the woman in the car? Well, that's my wife, all right? What do you have in the trunk? So I said, just some greasy stuff. Can I open the trunk? Now, I could have said no, because that's my private property and you need a search
Mm-hmm.
warrant. But then I don't have time for him to call in and wait for a search warrant. And plus, this escalates an encounter with a police officer.
Yeah.
And I was trained from childhood by my mother, as was my brother and my sister, how to interact with police. Okay.
That's quite
And
useful.
let me say that differently. We're trained how to not get shot by the police. Okay.
Wow.
And this began in the 1960s, right on up through the 70s. And then we're empty nest. And then we then share this info with our children. So yes, I grant him access to my trunk, but I could have said, no, you don't have access to my trunk. Well, then that would make him suspicious. And then he'd call it, then all of a sudden that becomes something more than what it became. Okay. But that's, again, he was polite, but firm, and expected me to do everything that he said he wanted me to do, even if the request was outside of the rights that I am granted by the US Constitution. So there's another case. I was driving in Texas, and a police car followed me in my blind spot for about 10 miles, just rode the blind spot. And that was curious. And I keep thinking, maybe they assume I'm a criminal. And if I see them, then I'll step on it and try to escape. And then there's a chase, and then they call another police, then I'm shot dead. Right. So, so
Well, Neil, I want to
these
ask
are,
you. I want to ask you a question that I'm a little hesitant to ask you, because it's the situation in the U.S. right now, like with the Black Lives Matter protest and all the police problems that we're having with minority communities. It's a very complex issue, but you're a person who thinks a lot about very complex issues and comes up with ideas and answers. So I want to know: do you have any ideas for how the situation can be improved. What do you think?
Yeah, and I recommended that in my note, uh, reflections on the color of my skin. What I said was, we want to believe that there are only some bad cops. Okay, that's what authorities will tell you. All right, and most cops are good. Some are bad. We have to get rid of. We have to find the bad ones and never appoint them in the first place, or use their conduct in this, on the force to winnow them out. Okay. What I said was, I don't know how many bad cops there are, but what I do know is it their culture? Is it whatever forces are operating? You don't see good cops stopping the behavior of bad cops.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, if a third cop or second cop, however many cops were on the scene with George Floyd, went up to him and said, "No, dude, he said he can't breathe," and pulled off the police, we would have that on video.
Mm-hmm.
That would be no less viral than any other video that we have of police being brutal. You know this. And so that would give us some confidence. Wait a minute, this was just a bad apple that somehow got loose. Okay. And I imagine how far that would go in restoring confidence in the role that police play in our lives.
It's an excellent point.
But you don't see that. We've never seen that in any of these cases.
Well, with George Floyd in particular, the exact opposite is what was filmed. There were several
the opposite. Now you can go back to Rodney King, and how many officers were there? I don't even remember because there were so many. Probably. Yeah. There was one who looked like he was stopping an extra hit, but so and I think that came out in the trials, right? There's like one or two, but no one just said. A higher level person, a captain or whatever, didn't come to stop, right? You didn't see this. And so either you are a bad cop or you're complicit with bad cops.
Yeah.
That does not bode well for public confidence. So no, I don't have an easy solution to all of this.
Well, I think that is a relatively easy solution. Like if people do have different opinions and they don't want to see that going on, it's good to get that message out there.
You have to change the culture. Whatever is the culture is they stick up for themselves. It's like a fraternity, right? Yeah. And no, you'd expect that in any club, any fraternity. You stick up for your own, right? I get that. But if sticking up for your own in this context destabilizes society, then maybe it's time to rethink that code that you're following. And by the way, police brutality is not new. It's been going on, like I said, that's why we had these lessons in my household as early as I can remember. So it's not new. What's new is you now know about it no matter where it happens in the country. George Floyd dies in police custody. It is national news. For decades, that was barely local news. Local news. Go back, look at these cases, see what the coverage was. I'm telling you, if police killed a black person in a local city, the neighboring county that would not be news in the neighboring county. But now everybody sees it and hears it in a way that's progress, sort of. That it doesn't get by without getting noticed and getting.
And it sparked a national debate, and it sparked a national discussion and a national
and an internationally sympathetic marches as well.
Yes, good.
So it's been extraordinary. It's an extraordinary time.
Okay, Neil, I have a couple more questions for you. The next one is, my son Charlie is 10 years old, and like you were when you were a kid, he is also obsessed with all things space related, and that would include you too. So the next question is actually coming from him. What do you think is beyond the known universe?
Oh, I have no idea. Maybe he'll figure it out one day. No, we don't. Well, first, the very construct of the question, what's beyond the known universe? Well, if we knew it, then it would be part of the known universe and it wouldn't be beyond it. So
I think it's been phrased as the observable universe.
Yeah, well, that's the same as the known universe. Okay. So So the way the question is worded so you have to ask, what's outside the horizon of our time and space? And we have some ideas. Maybe there's a multiverse out there.
Mhm.
That would be kind of interesting if that were true. It comes out of the equations. So we didn't just pull this out of nowhere. Equations that describe other things that are tested and accepted, those same equations give us a multiverse. So that's why we have that's why you hear as much about a multiverse as you do parallel universes. So, but we don't know for sure. And we need more curious people on the case, as it sounds like
I'll
Charlie.
get him. I'll get him right on it.
Get him right on. Tell him I want a full report in the morning.
Done. It'll be there. All right. Finally, Neil, I want to know from 2017, which was the bigger honor for you in your life? Was it winning a Grammy for the best spoken word album, or was it being on The Simpsons as yourself?
So first of all, I didn't win the Grammy. I don't know if you got that off of a wiki page too. I was
Oh,
nominated
sorry.
for
Well,
a
that's
Grammy.
still quite an honor.
Nominated for a Grammy. So for me, it was the Grammy nomination,
Hmm.
um, because it's a complete other thing,
Yeah.
and I have other honors that are it's an odd combination of honors. Like I have a species named after me, a leaping frog. It's
Of
called
course.
Indrani Tysoni. I think it's Latinized, so I have to remember. And I have an asteroid named after me, and I double check to make sure it's not headed towards Earth, because you don't want to be that asteroid.
Yeah.
That's not the asteroid you want to have your name on. But the entertainment world, I don't see myself as fundamentally part of that world. I'm an interloper.
Mm.
So if I'm recognized, it's particularly special, but I'm not seeking it. And so that's why it's something that came unexpectedly. As for appearing on The Simpsons, I'd already been on 6 or 7 other cartoons.
Yeah.
So that was just an increment on. I'd been parodied or caricatured in Family Guy.
Yeah.
And, there's some others. There's some kids shows. I don't know. Your 10-year-old might have been through them. I think he's a little old for them now. One of them is Gravity Falls.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yep.
a family that has a pet pig, and I voiced the pig
Oh, really?
in one. Well, the pig got really smart and invented an atom smasher overnight. And so while it was smart, I was its voice. It's just a cute little thing.
Perfect.
I was on a reading program. So I had been cartooned. I was also a voice in Ice Age 5. Bet you didn't know there were 5 of those movies.
I did
you?
not know that. No, this seems like it's your
Neither did I when I
part-time
was
job is
asked.
being in cartoons.
Yeah, I'm actually a weasel, Neil the Buck Weasel. And I help them solve one of their science problems. So typically when I'm asked to be in these, I'll only agree if it makes sense, right? There's got to be some sciencey reason.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have a very wide accommodation of artistic freedom. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to try to over constrain what they're thinking up. But if there's any science in it and I can lend a voice to the authenticity of it or the humor of it, I'm delighted to. So, right. So The Simpsons they were Johnny come latelys.
Okay. Well, Neil, this has been such a great talk. I've had a good time, of course. You're such an inspiring person to me and so many people around the world, and I really appreciate you taking your time to talk with me today on Eat My Inspiration.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that. And if I could just add one last thing.
Please.
Often when people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're such a natural at this," that's really the highest compliment you can get, because it means you've worked so hard to be good at it. People don't imagine that you worked hard to be good at it, because
Mm.
it's so much a part of who you are and what you emanate. So um, it's it's simultaneously also an insult, because it's saying, "Oh no, you probably didn't work hard. You're just born with that." So I work hard, and there's a lot of interstitial minutes in a day
Mhm.
that most people spend doing nothing,
Mm.
and I harness those, I corral those, and use it to further grow my understanding of the world, my inspirations, my wisdom. I read, I consume documentaries. I also love high budget entertainment science fiction films. Again, this is my modern day escape because I can't wrestle anymore. I'm too old. But it's another way to escape. And so there is no substitute for hard work. I just want to put that out there.
I love it. I love it. Neil, thanks again. This has been fantastic.
Thanks for having me. And I enjoy your format. Keep it going.
Thank you very much for saying that. Thank you to Neil for taking the time to talk with me. It was obviously such a great joy to have the chance to speak with him, but also great to hear about the moments and people from his life that helped to shape him into such an accomplished and fascinating man. Check out his newest series, Cosmos, Possible Worlds, on Mondays on Fox, and streaming on Hulu the following day. And don't miss his wonderful podcast, Star Talk. Also, do go find him on Twitter at Neil Tyson for an inspiring, entertaining, and informative experience. He's also on Instagram, Facebook, and yes, even TikTok at Neil deGrasse Tyson. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Meet My Inspiration, and I hope we've been able to inspire you too, even if just a little. Sometimes that's all it takes to make great things happen. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like broadcasting to the world everything you do online. Here's how to protect yourself and get 3 months for free. Did you know that your internet service provider knows every single website you visit? And what's worse is they can sell this information to ad companies and tech giants who will use your data to target you. ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that your online activity can't be seen by anyone. ExpressVPN works on all devices, phones, laptops, even routers, so that everyone who shares your Wi-Fi is protected too. And the best part is using ExpressVPN is super easy. Just fire up the app, click one button, and you're protected. ExpressVPN is the world's #1 rated VPN by TechRadar, Wired, The Verge, and countless others. So if you believe your online activity is your business, secure yourself by visiting expressvpn.com/MMI, and you can get an extra 3 months for free. That's expressvpn.com/MMI.